This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A militant attack on a Niger military base kills 25 soldiers. Sudan's Prime Minister makes an historic visit to the rebel-held south, sparking renewed hopes for peace. And we look at the works of a Nigerian designer incorporating traditional African designs into functional furniture. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, South Africa's finance minister warns conformists opposed to economic reform. And in sports, American Johannes Veerman takes a one-shot lead in the first day of the South African Open. We start the hour in Niger, where a militant attack on an army base has left 25 soldiers dead. The country's defense spokesperson detailed the event in a televised statement. He added 63 militants were killed in the fighting. The attack took place in Chanagodrar, over 200 kilometers from the capital, Niamey. The post is near the border of Mali. The assault coincides with efforts by militant groups to push the Nigerian army from its western border with Mali.
The response with aerial support from the Niger Air Force and our partners allowed us to hit back and push our enemies outside our borders. The Minister of Defense, in the name of the President of the Republic, Supreme Chief of the Army, and in the name of the government, presents saddened condolences to the victims and families and wish a quick recovery to the wounded.
To Tunisia now, where French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has met with Tunisian President Kais Saied in the capital, Tunis. The two leaders discussed a number of issues. Topping the agenda, though, was the ongoing conflict in Libya. Le Drian has warned that Libya's destabilization could impact security in North Africa. CGTN's Laura Walubengo has more.
Libya has been in a state of violence since a NATO air campaign in 2011. The campaign led to the fall of its longtime leader, Muammar Gaddafi. But ongoing violence in the North African nation has gotten the international community concerned.
Stabilizing Libya while respecting the international law is a priority that we share with Tunisia. I discussed with President Saied the meetings in Cairo and Brussels, which took place over the last few days. My European and Egyptian colleagues and I underlined the risk of escalations taking place in Libya, which threatens to destabilize the whole region from the Maghreb to the Sahel. The agreements concluded between the Government of National Accord and Turkey deliberately deviate from the international law and worsens the situation.
Le Drian further reiterated France's support to help restore peace in Libya.
France, like Tunisia, supports the efforts of the UN envoy for Libya, Mr. Salama. There is an international consensus for Berlin conference to be held shortly, which will help to find solutions to the crisis. In order to end the crisis, an inter-Libyan dialogue is required, and there must be political process which implicates regional actors and neighboring countries more closely, including Tunisia.
Turkey and Russia have urged Libya's warring parties to declare a ceasefire beginning Sunday. The move has, however, been criticized by one of Libya's rival factions. Libya's Arab armed forces, led by ex-General Khalifa Haftar, has attached conditions to achieving a ceasefire.
First, the continuation of the efforts of the armed forces in their war against terrorist groups, classified by resolutions of the United Nations Security Council, continue to demonstrate through experience that there is no way to establish a civil state except by these terrorist groups' complete elimination. As these groups have seized the capital Tripoli and they receive support from some countries and governments that provide them with military equipment, ammunition and various weapons.
Both Russia and Turkey have been accused of fueling the Libyan conflict. Just last week, Turkish parliament approved the deployment of troops to Libya in efforts to reinforce military support to the UN-backed Government of National Accord led by Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj. The ongoing violence has so far left at least 4,000 people dead, displacing hundreds of thousands others. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
To Sudan now, where Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is in Darfur meeting with rebel leaders. The Prime Minister received a celebratory welcome in the town of Kuda. The visit also marked the second time the World Food Programme visited the poverty-stricken region since 2011.
Sudan's Darfur region has for years faced ongoing insecurity. The mission for Sudan's Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, is to establish peace.
We are very happy with this historical reception, which means a lot in the peace file. We hope that it will be followed with other steps and to be a start to achieve sustainable peace, to put an end to the suffering of our people in this area. This is a beginning for a new Sudan, capable of addressing issues of popularity and diversity, and, if God is willing, together we will make miracles.
The crowd held placards illustrating their demands. Chief among them is the establishment of a secular state. Abdel Aziz Al-Hil, the leader of the country's largest rebel group, echoed these calls. 5 cabinet ministers and UN officials also took part in the visit. Fighting has prevented aid groups from visiting the region.
So for the United Nations, this is the first time we are here in a very long time. And we thank these 2 leaders for breaking down the barriers and building up the opportunity.
Sudan's transitional government has 6 months to establish peace with rebels. Asta Tal, CGTN.
Djibouti is looking to expand its strategic relationship with China in the fields of the blue and digital economies. President Ismail Omar Guelleh of Djibouti said this while meeting with visiting Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He said Djibouti regards China as an indispensable partner. Officials also spoke of the Chinese-built Djibouti-Ethiopia railway aimed at promoting regional connectivity and economic integration. Wang Yi, on the other hand, said the partnership between the 2 countries has maintained a high level of development. He added that China will align with Djibouti's development plan, Vision Djibouti 2035, and strengthen cooperation in areas including the blue economy, telecommunications, and the digital economy. Now, in Iran, the country's civil aviation chief has rejected reports that the Ukrainian passenger plane disaster was caused by a missile strike. Tehran says it's inviting experts from Boeing to join the investigation into the crash of the 737 jetliner. An independent investigative agency from the United States has also agreed to join the investigation. The disaster occurred soon after Iran fired missiles against military bases in Iraq, housing U.S. forces. Western leaders say the evidence suggests it was an Iranian missile which brought down the plane, possibly in error. Our correspondent Nathan King has more.
Yeah, the clearest indication yet that this could have been an Iranian surface-to-air missile. Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, coming out and says, look, it's not just intelligence from the US, it's not just intelligence from Canada, but also allies of Canada too, that suggest that is the most likely outcome of what happened to that flight, Ukrainian flight heading to Kiev, which killed 176 people, all of them on board.
We have intelligence from multiple sources, including our allies and our own intelligence. The evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile. This may well have been unintentional. This new information reinforces the need for a thorough investigation into this matter.
As Justin Trudeau was speaking, new video was released first on the New York Times website, which showed, it looks like, an explosion there. You can see that after a projectile hitting the plane as it was leaving Tehran airport. Obviously, that needs to be verified, but the first video that anyone has seen that suggests that what Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, is saying could very much be the case. And he is calling for an investigation, but meanwhile he's been backed up by nameless US officials from the intelligence community who've been briefing the media here in Washington all day, and also some heavy hinting from US President Trump that he thinks it was an Iranian missile that shot this plane down by mistake.
Somebody could have made a mistake on the other side, could have made a mistake. It was flying, it was flying in not our system, no, it has nothing to do with us. It was flying in a pretty rough neighborhood.
Now, Iran's position on what exactly happened has evolved over the last few days. First of all, they said it was a technical error. Now they're pausing, really, as new evidence is coming to light. They're actually asking Canada for the intelligence. Meanwhile, on the ground are 45 Ukrainian crash investigators. Ukrainians, of course, have a lot of experience after an airliner was shot down over its territory, believed to be from a Russian surface-to-air missile there. They have said that they're not ruling anything out, but it doesn't look like technical error. They've even said it could have been potentially terrorism or an exploding engine. We'll have to wait and see. And this sort of thing has happened before. 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down an Iranian airline with 290 people on board. All of them perished. That was just over the Persian Gulf. And the US said at the beginning that it didn't think it did it, and then admitted it did and said it was a mistake. And the lack of an apology there really led to a sharpening of anger in Iran and a rise of nationalism. And it's awful to see this tragedy play out. Of course, Iran was in the middle of expecting potentially a US attack on its soil, but this mistake, obviously, if it's proven to be, is an awful tragedy for all those concerned and their families. Nathan King, CGTN, Washington.
Meanwhile, the U.S. House of Representatives has approved a measure aimed at curbing President Donald Trump's powers to launch further military action against Iran. The resolution is non-binding, but it demands the White House not engage in military activity against Tehran unless authorized by Congress. The move comes after the U.S. assassinated Iran's top general last Friday, escalating tensions between the two countries. The measure now goes to the Senate, which is controlled by Trump's Republican Party, where it will face an uphill battle. Well, staying with news from the Middle East, where the fallout over Iran's retaliatory missile strikes against U.S. interests in Iraq continues. Our reporter Tony Cheng is in Erbil, the location of one of the Iraqi bases that was hit in that attack. He told us about how the Iraqi people feel about being the center of tensions between the U.S. and Iran.
Well, they have said to us that, they were anticipating this to blow up. They said this is now just part of their everyday lives, which is really rather tragic. Of course, here in Erbil, for the last 4 years, they've been fighting a war against ISIS, literally just down the road. One man even told us, we are so used now to blood and death as part of our everyday lives that this is just normal.
We feel really sad that the Iranians and the Americans are fighting in our land. Unfortunately, the Iraqi government is saying nothing about it. They're bombing us with rockets, and the Iraqi government is doing nothing.
Most Iraqi people grew up with blood and death. For 50 years, we've been accustomed to it. The Americans and Iranians should leave us and let us live our lives.
I wish there was no more fighting in my country, and these people shouldn't come here anymore. I wish Kurds could be safe.
I felt sad when I heard that Iran had attacked us. It's a bad feeling. I hope this doesn't happen again. It's really bad for the Kurdish people.
When we arrived a couple of days ago, just after the missile strikes on Erbil, there was certainly a very tense feeling here. I think people bracing themselves for what they felt could potentially be a very explosive conflict, one in which they were going to get caught up. But over the last couple of days, what we've seen, the words we've seen coming out of Tehran and Washington, D.C., have de-escalated somewhat. I think people are still concerned that there may be further twists and turns in this. But for the moment, at least, they seem relatively calm and relaxed.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. No deal yet. Ethiopia and Egypt failed to resolve their Renaissance Dam disputes. And retracing Uganda's armed resistance, Museveni completes a 200-kilometer commemorative walk.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
He reached out to all stakeholders. He spoke to everyone, which meant that sometimes he was sitting around the table with characters that you could describe as slightly unsavory. He spent a lot of time with persons that many considered to be at the root of problems.
History has shown that his position was correct because he was against the war in Iraq purely because he didn't believe there were weapons of mass destruction, and I think we still haven't found them.
Ethiopia and Egypt have failed to resolve a long-running dispute over a massive dam being built on the Blue Nile River. During the latest round of talks that concluded on Thursday, water ministers from the two countries failed to agree on the timelines of filling the dam's reservoir. Ethiopia has said it would like to fill it over a period of over 4 to 7 years. Egypt has, however, submitted a new proposal in which the dam would be filled over 12 to 21 years. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has been a source of tension ever since Ethiopia broke ground on the project in 2011. The talks that were held in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, are part of a dialogue between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan that began in November. Egypt argues that filling the dam too fast would affect water supply within its territory.
They have come up with a new chart that states the filling of the dam should be delayed to between 12 to 21 years. This is not acceptable by any measure, totally unacceptable.
Well, let's bring you some analysis now on this deadlock. We are joined by Dr. Hassan Kanenje, the director of the Horn Institute here in Kenya. Dr. Kanenje, thank you so much for joining us. So 2 days of talks between Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan, and still no resolution. In your view, what is the core sticking point when it comes to the Grand Renaissance Dam?
I think as you've slightly alluded to, the issue number one is the time. The issue number is the quantity. Now, the time frame for Ethiopia appears to be too long, at least based on what Egypt is insisting. And because this dam, given the amount of investment Ethiopia has put in, they would like to start making use of it fully as soon as possible. And of course, that has implications not just for the Ethiopian economy, for the regional economy. And Egypt is afraid that this may lead to declining water quantities. And we understand that Egypt relies almost exclusively on the Nile as its source of water for agriculture and other things. And therefore, that time frame and, of course, the quantity of the water, I think they have the major sticking points here. But I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, given that the parties are already negotiating on those two sticking or other important points.
Indeed, and of course, it seems that they are running out of time, though. There was an agreement or a deadline agreed to of the 15th of Jan with Washington. Considering what's at stake, is there any chance at all of resolving this by that deadline?
Oh, there's always a chance, for issues such as this ones. But I think it's important to remember that both the Nile Treaty of 1929 and 1959 had given Egypt, or at least disproportionately, were in favor of Egypt, to the disadvantage of actually other countries, both downstream and upstream. And therefore, you would not expect the talks over it are going to take just 2 weeks or 2 days or even 1 year. However, given what has been put in so far, I think it's in the best interest of both countries, and they recognize that, to reach some kind of a settlement. Now, this might not come next week in Washington, but it's likely to come perhaps in the course of this year, if not in the first quarter of 2020.
Ethiopia is obviously very unhappy with Egypt at the moment, accusing the country of having no intention at all of reaching a deal. But, you know, considering, as you mentioned, that this dates back to the 1950s, what is the best way for them to come to some kind of resolution?
You know, the best way is always to expand the pie and at least strike a compromise, such that when their interests from both sides with regard to the use of the Nile River, and we understand that when parties start negotiating over a contentious issue, they always start from extreme positions. However, we expect that those strategies are going to move from positions to interests, and the strategic interest of both countries is to actually ensure there's an agreement so that Ethiopia can start using the dam and Egypt can continue to use the Nile River.
Well, let's see what Washington will bring to the conversation when they take the talks to the United States. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassan Kanenje, joining us here in our Nairobi studio. Now let's turn to news in Uganda, where the country's president, Yoweri Museveni, has finished a 200-kilometer trek. The walk is meant to symbolize his leadership journey since his days as a guerrilla leader in the country's jungles. During the walk, Museveni promoted his revolutionary ideas and wealth creation goals. But critics are viewing the march as little more than a publicity stunt ahead of next year's elections. CGTN's Hilary Ayasaga reports.
Step by step, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni retraced the route that brought him to power more than 30 years ago. The 6-day trek in Wakiso district passed through the jungles where he began his guerrilla warfare in the early 80s and ended at Birembo in Kakumiro district. Along the route, he promoted his revolutionary ideas and government efforts to alleviate poverty in rural areas.
The struggle we have embarked on is to uplift our people from poverty. I have started loan schemes that will help them grow their businesses.
But the president has been roundly criticized after a video surfaced of an elderly man kneeling at his feet, arms outstretched for a handout.
President Museveni has come face to face with is that his 30 years in government has not changed the lives of so many people, including the families of those who sacrificed and fought with him in the bush.
According to the Bureau of Statistics, 8 million Ugandans still live in poverty. It's an issue that could take center stage in the 2021 elections. President Museveni will likely square off against the popular reggae singer Bobi Wine, who has fashioned himself a champion of the poor.
So this trek is nothing but a political showmanship to remind people in the eve of the election next year that President Museveni is still here and that he views leadership of this country as a reward for his struggles in the bush.
President Museveni's trek could help him gain some confidence among his supporters as he seeks the 6th term in office. The walk itself may prove the easy part, as Bobi Wine gains traction is what is likely to be a hard-fought election. Hilary Ayasaga, CGTN, Kampala.
The South Sudanese parties to the 2018 peace agreement are scheduled to form a unity government next month. Security was the main outstanding issue that delayed the formation of a unity government last year. The Joint Military Ceasefire Commission says it's moved over 500 forces from both Sudan's People's Liberation Movement and the South Sudan People's Defense Force military training centers. The forces are scheduled to be trained to form a unified army, as required by the revitalized peace agreement.
What I would like to say to the people of South Sudan and the world at large is that this marks the beginning of peace and gearing up to the formation of the government.
We are ready to start the training of the forces once they all come together in the camp, and this shows that the government will be formed on that day.
The United Nations Special Representative for Somalia, James Swan, has been visiting Somaliland, where he met with stakeholders for discussions on a range of developments. Now, among them was the region's long-delayed parliamentary elections, which have raised concerns among international partners. Here's more on this from CGTN's Laura Walubengo.
The United Nations is following up on confidence-building efforts and dialogue between authorities in Hargeisa and Mogadishu.
The United Nations welcomes initiatives aimed at building mutual confidence and fostering dialogue between Hargeisa and Mogadishu. We believe there are many areas in which greater cooperation could improve security, promote economic growth, and improve the lives of the people.
The UN official spoke after meeting with Somaliland's President Musa Bihi Abdi and members of his cabinet. This visit was his second to Somaliland in 6 months. Somaliland's parliamentary elections, which have been delayed along with local elections, also came into question. The international body notes that their delay is affecting Somaliland's democracy and international standing. They also voiced concern over both houses of parliament having their terms extended.
We welcome the inter-party dialogue and urge implementation of the recent agreements that would enable preparations for elections to be held in 2020. We call on Somaliland authorities to ensure respect for freedom of speech and assembly, as well as the ability of political parties to organize and function. Such political space is essential for a credible process.
The UN envoy also addressed the long-standing disputes between the regions of Sol and Sanag. This is particularly in the aftermath of fighting around Tukarak in 2018. Tensions led to an outbreak of fighting near the Tukarak area of the Sol region between Somaliland and neighboring Puntland, with the violence taking place amid an already difficult humanitarian situation locally. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Nearly 11 million children in Nigeria are out of school, making it the country with the highest rate of out-of-school children. Instability caused by a decade-long insurgency in the north is fueling the crisis. But a team of innovators are trying to bridge the gap through a digital platform which allows children to learn from the comfort of their homes. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
An ongoing homeschooling session for these siblings. 11-year-old Ayomide and his 9-year-old sister Kemi have been homeschooled for the past 1 year now. Worried about the rising insecurity, their father decided to withdraw them from school.
There's a lot of insecurity in Nigeria and in schools, particularly the northern part of the country. So I decided to get a study mate so that my mind will be at peace.
But the kids are not missing out on their education. They're equipped with an interactive digital learning platform that covers their curriculum all year round. And illustrations are animated to catch the students' interest.
StudyMate helps me to learn better, and after learning with the StudyMate, it has a knowledge check. Knowledge check is the ability to take a short quiz with the interactive feedback.
The platform is the brainchild of Thomas Ukedojo, an IT expert with a passion for education. Thomas and his team spent over a year developing the learning platform. They put together a multimedia studio where the learning materials are produced. It's his contribution to building the country's educational system.
We look at our educational system and then we discover that there's a lot of gap. The kids are not doing well in school. But we know if education is good, it shows in the country. It shows in the development of the country. The question we need to ask ourselves is, how many innovators do we have today? How many creators do we have? And that was one of the things that inspired me.
The UN's Children's Agency, UNICEF, reports that Nigeria accounts for 10.5 million children out of school. Terrorists have burnt down schools, kidnapped students, and killed teachers. Learning has become unsafe, especially in the northeastern region. Now the StudyMate is gaining traction here with over 50,000 users in just a few months. And the numbers are most likely to rise to give more children the opportunity to get good education. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's coming up in your business news up next. South Africa's finance minister warns conformists opposed to economic reforms. And Kenya's Safaricom shares rise to an all-time high. In your business news, South Africa's finance minister Tito Mboweni has raised a storm over resistance to his proposed reforms. In early morning tweets, Mboweni warned that the country would face a catastrophe if the government fails to implement economic reforms. The minister seemed to be directing his frustration at a group he referred to as conformists. Last August, the Treasury released a discussion document proposing reforms aimed at creating over 1 million jobs. The proposals include opening up rail transport to competition, exempting small businesses from industry wage agreements, and reducing red tape for businesses. However, the policy document has faced resistance from within the ANC, as well as from its Labour allies. The Congress of South African Trade Unions is among its vocal critics. It has opposed labour markets deregulation in particular. Now, Kenya's Safaricom's share price has shot up, nearly touching its all-time high of 32 US cents. The country's leading telecommunications firm's stock price made a 550% gain in value since listing on the Nairobi Securities Exchange back in June 2008. Safaricom's share value has also increased by 49% in the last 12 months. The mobile services provider is Kenya's most profitable company. It's counting on digital payments through its mobile money platform M-Pesa to drive up revenues in future as voice and SMS revenue growth decline. The company also plans to grow its e-commerce business, which is gaining traction across Africa. The World Bank has cut its forecast for Ethiopia's economic growth in the 2020 fiscal year to 6.3%. This is well below the government's projection of 10.8%. The global lender has cited the accumulating debt burden of state-owned firms and the worsening security situation as concerns. The government's economic reforms have attracted billions of dollars in financial support by renewing interest from investors. However, Ethiopia is struggling with foreign currency shortages, shrinking exports, and the highest record inflation in half a decade. While staying in Ethiopia, foreign investors looking to put their money to work in the country could soon have more options on where to invest. The government is mulling a new law which would open some restricted sectors to foreigners. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoy explores how local investors are already laying the groundwork for the bill's passage.
Addis Alemayo is on the lookout for foreign partners. The communications executive believes the government's plan to open up more sectors to foreign investors will bring a flood of opportunities for local firms like his.
So if you're a foreign investor coming to a market like this, rather than starting from scratch, you're going to look for a local partner that has some market share, some revenue, and some sort of track record so that you can partner with them and build something better. So I think there's a ton of opportunities for local firms if they're willing and open to work with foreign firms.
The new bill still needs to be voted into law, but if it passes, it could allow foreign investors to grab a foothold in sectors that include logistics, media, energy, and mining. The government has set a minimum of $200,000 as capital for foreign investors who want to set businesses here. And for those who want to have joint investment with local operators, they will be required to have at least $150,000. It is all part of the government's privatization drive, which is meant to reduce the national debt, generate foreign inflows, and speed up growth. The government has already announced plans to sell a minority stake in Ethiopia's telecommunications, and 6 sugar factories are to be sold in the first quarter of 2020.
There was a pronouncement of privatization, but we've not jumped into it the next day. We've been careful in understanding the sectoral challenge, sector-specific challenge, and developed a strategy. So you will see that Ethiopia's experience would be, as has been the case, a very unique experience. We're hoping that, like we did in the brewery sector, for instance, this would be a successful privatization experience.
But not everyone is convinced. Some local investors fear foreigners will steal business from them. Alemayo says the skepticism stems from not understanding what opening up the economy will actually mean.
The last 27, 28 years, we've had sort of a mixed economy that's more or less, I still say, wasn't opened enough. I think whether we like it or not, Ethiopia is going to join WTO. Whether we like it or not, we've already signed into the Africa Free Trade Agreement. So whether we like it or not, we have to open up these key sectors. So I think it's time to buckle up and get ready for that competition.
Alemayo believes this is where the government can help, by offering loans, for example, to those looking to beef up their production and advising them on how to survive with the competition that will come with the opening up. Colette Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Following a series of crashes, Boeing's future is starting to look bleak. The U.S. plane maker's shares slumped 1.8% in pre-market trading on Wednesday after its 737-800 aircraft made by the aerospace and defense giant suffered a fatal crash in Tehran. CGTN's Karina Huber takes a look at Boeing's troubled year and what's to come.
For the first time in 7 years, Boeing is no longer the world's biggest aircraft maker. Its European rival Airbus has bumped it from the top spot, delivering a record 863 aircraft in 2019, while Boeing delivered just 345 planes.
The year started off in a promising way. Financially, Boeing was doing rather well. Its share price was up. Then you had that second MAX crash, and everything went from bad to worse.
The 737 MAX, Boeing's fuel-efficient aircraft, was once its crown jewel. But in March, the plane was grounded globally after being involved in 2 fatal crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia that killed a total of 346 people. It still remains grounded. In early December, a former employee at Boeing turned whistleblower testified in front of U.S. lawmakers.
I formally warned Boeing leadership in writing on multiple occasions, specifically once before the Lion Air crash and again before the Ethiopian Airlines crash, about potential airplane risk due to the unstable operating environment within the factory. Those warnings were ignored.
Weeks later, Boeing's CEO, Dennis Muilenburg, was ousted. In a statement, the company said a change in leadership was necessary to restore confidence in the company moving forward as it works to repair relationships with regulators, customers, and other stakeholders.
Despite Boeing's troubles in 2019, the stock ended the year with a 1% gain, remarkable given the headwinds the company still faces in 2020.
Boeing is being investigated by numerous U.S. regulators. It is also expected to pay billions in compensation to both the families of the victims in the crashes and airlines for their financial losses related to the 737 MAX. Kaplan says those payments are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Boeing's troubles.
The majority of Boeing's losses related to the MAX are not going to be those checks that it's going to be writing out. It's going to be the impact on its business for years to come. Higher costs because of all the additional scrutiny, the additional work it's going to have to do to please the FAA, and lower revenue because right now this is not a particularly attractive aircraft.
Kaplan says the company is going to have to work a lot harder to sell what was once its fastest-selling airplane. Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
American retailers are starting to report results from their most critical period, the holiday shopping season. And while online sales are booming, it is a double-edged sword. Customers are returning more goods than ever before, and that cuts into revenues. However, the rise in returns is also an opportunity for startups. CGTN's Owen Fairclough has more from Washington.
Macy's is one of the giants of US retail, but these are challenging times. The company is to close 29 of the stores in its group in the coming weeks, and its sales for the most critical part of the year, from Thanksgiving to Christmas, were down marginally compared to last year. and Macy's and its rivals are having to keep up with ever-changing customer habits driven by online shopping. Even if retail spending is up for the recent holiday season, chains like Macy's are at the mercy of consumers who are returning goods like never before. They account for around $370 billion in lost sales every year, but those losses have created opportunities.
These are boots.
Paper Source in Washington, D.C. is exactly the kind of traditional store under threat from the internet. But Deborah Rios Bernal has found a way to embrace it with happy returns.
It's kind of like the funniest thing when you have the clothes and shoes and someone's coming in and there will start to be inquiries into it, like, you sell shoes, you sell clothes, like, no, we actually do this process called happy returns.
The company charges retailers a flat fee to handle their online returns and even provide in-store exchanges, lowering the overheads from complex supply chains. And there are benefits for both parties.
We get new clientele that comes in and don't know our shop, and we have a coupon for them that lets them, stay in here, take $5 off any purchase, and they're happy.
Retail experts say sellers who are unable to limit the cost of what they call a product's digital journey will lose out as online shopping continues to threaten traditional stores. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Well, staying in the United States, the world's biggest tech event is well underway in Las Vegas. This year's Consumer Electronics Show is hosting more than 4,500 exhibitors. They've launched nearly 20,000 products covering artificial intelligence, 5G, smart cities and more. Our correspondent Edith Tianzin showed us some tech developed by Chinese companies hoping to improve the world of entertainment.
A growing number of tech companies are taking over the drone market. Among them, a Chinese company called Sublu is taking the technology into the seas.
Yeah.
This can go 40 meters down.
Yeah, and with this, it's for novice of diving, so it can go with like 4 or 5 meters.
And I could not resist trying out one of the so-called underwater scooters.
Ready.
It can be used for free diving or simply for swimming pool fun. The gadget can also hold accessories like lights and cameras. With 3 speed modes reaching up to 2 meters per second, its battery life will let you cruise the waters for 75 minutes. Other than water sports, it can also be used in professional areas like ocean surveys and conservation. Another field making big advances is augmented reality. Nreal is a Chinese brand glasses that connects to your phone, allowing you to see multiple application screens in a holographic display.
The major user cases right now is for movie watching, video watching, or do the presentation. And also we have the sharing experience, so other people can join. Multiple users can look at the same thing at the same time.
They've also developed software that allows you to control your smart home gadgets or have an immersive shopping experience where items will appear in 3D holograms. Wow. And you can even place them in your room to see how they fit. And hundreds of developers are working on turning this technology into a gaming experience. Another innovation combining fun with convenience is Segway's new S-Pod. The Chinese scooter maker has introduced the first ever self-balancing sit-down scooter.
The first step we are seeing this should be at places like enclosed campuses, like theme parks, malls, airports, or corporate parks. And then in the future, we do see this essential equipment on the street.
With all these scooters, drones, and robots, CES has once again unveiled numerous devices that are designed to make our lives more productive and fun at the same time. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Las Vegas.
You're watching Africa Live, still to come on the program. A look at the works of a Nigerian designer incorporating traditional African art into functional furniture. Welcome back. Let's take a look now at Studio Lani, a Nigerian firm that specializes in furniture design. Spearheaded by the designer Lani Adeoye, the studio incorporates traditional African designs into functional furniture and interior design.
This is Lani Adeoye's latest design. That's right, a floor lamp. Inspired by a phrase in Yoruba slang, Sisi Eko, which roughly translates to a trendy woman living in the city, is the right name here for this well put together sculpture.
This is the Sisi Eko floor lamp. It's a sculptural piece. So it's one of the few pieces I finished by hand myself because it's really evolved over a couple of years.
Adeoye was trained in New York and started making contemporary African pieces back in 2013. For her, the goal here is to incorporate traditional African designs into functional furniture as well as interior designs.
The idea of merging, culture or heritage that I've always been passionate about from a young age, and learning about the design industry and understanding that we have something to add to that narrative as Africans, and a lot of times we're not our stories being told from other people's perspective. So I think there's something really interesting about being in this point in time now where we as Africans, there are other African designers like myself who are exploring and trying to sort of create their own narrative that showcases our beautiful diverse culture in a positive light.
The 30-year-old designer's work range from indoor to outdoor furniture. Lighting fixtures and other interior decor are also included on the table. Her work is inspired by various traditional and modern African themes. A notable inspiration, she says, is the traditional Yoruba musical instrument, the bata drum.
The talking drum for me is such an iconic West African musical instrument. I think what it represents, it really was one of the first telecommunication devices. If you think about it, the fact that you could pass a message from one place to another by beating a drum, and there was a language system to it. But visually also, the strings of the talking drum basically became metal lines. And so that's why I tend to work with a lot of metal lines, because that was the initial starting point.
Adeoye's pieces normally take between 2 weeks to 5 months to make. That's depending on the complexity of the design.
Is how the different lines work together to create different sculptural views.
So far, with over 30 designs under her belt, Adeoye has showcased her work in various exhibitions both at home and across Europe. But was it all easy?
You might not be able to afford a designer outfit, but you can probably name about a couple of designers that you like, that you can aspire to, that you want to aspire to buy from. But nobody can name a furniture designer that they want to get a product from. So it's a very weird, it's not just a Nigerian thing, it's a global thing. The furniture industry is quite closed, so it tends to be not really readily sort of open to the mass.
In terms of market trends, African art has been at the forefront in recent years. That's all thanks to designers like Adeoye, who are hinged on taking the continent's art scene mainstream. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
Now, in this day and age, blues rock music is not a mainstream genre. However, it is slowly making its way back to the masses through young artists. One such band popped up in Kenya. Refuge is one of the youngest blues rock bands in East Africa. And since their inception in 2016, the band is on a roller coaster ride, making waves in the underground rock scene of the region. Let's find out more about their musical journey.
I'm Silas. I'm Gabe. And I'm 14. I'm 15. Yeah, he's the eldest. I'm 14. I'm the tallest in the band.
Second tallest.
Yeah, sure, second tallest.
Well, we're a blues rock, classic rock band based here in Kenya.
And we love to play many genres such as blues, classic rock, and also many other things such as folk and a bit of country.
Well, it's kind of a common musical interest for all of us. We like that kind of old 60s, 70s music. And I think what we're trying to do essentially is we're trying to create like a resurgence of that kind of classic rock blues. Yeah?
I think it's just the type of music that all of us grew up listening to, with our parents just playing it around the house, so we kind of caught on.
Our idea of refuge is like, we're our own band, kind of like.
Yeah, they're not.
It's kind of different from like every music.
We have like a wide range of music's like very versatile.
Like our age, I guess, is like unique, but we don't like to be seen as the kid band.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. American Johannes Veerman takes a one-shot lead.